Beautiful.
Good afternoon. My name is Tara Bradbury, and here today we also have Ellen Bathgate from Rent Roll Starter. Hello, Ellen. How are you? We had
Good,
some
thanks, Tara. Hi, guys.
we had some fun this morning, didn't we? But we're on track
We
now.
sure did. Yes, we are.
So we've decided to do a private session with just the two of us, and what we will very much encourage is that anybody that does have questions after watching this presentation to contact us both directly, and if there's something specific that has been what we've personally discussed, please don't hesitate to make that connection, and we'll be more than happy to do questions and have a phone chat and certainly make sure that everyone gets an immense amount of wealth out of this presentation, because it is loaded with great information. So we're talking about starting the rent roll from the very beginning through to the finish of when you're getting close to the sales process as well. Now, I guess if you want to do a quick introduction, Ellen, of yourself and some of the things that you feel that will be of value that you're going to bring from your personal experience, and then obviously being in Rent Roll Starter now.
Yeah, sure. Thanks so much, Tara. Hi, everyone. So my name's Ellen. I'm from Rent Roll Starter. I run a coaching and mentoring company, especially for agencies that are just getting started with their rent rolls. So that's my experience. I started, grew, built, and then sold my rent roll, and I sold that at the beginning of last year. So I'm really passionate about the early stages of getting your rent roll started. But I'm also really passionate about making sure that while you own it, it's not too stressful, and that when you sell it, that's not too stressful either, because you want that whole process to be really seamless as well.
Absolutely. And for myself, I worked full-time in a role of a BDM for a company called YB Prestige Properties, and had the pleasure of working alongside the business owner, getting that experience from Jade as well, and would suggest that certainly I've got a lot of feedback today more so on the sale process side versus the buying inside. So I think there's going to be some great feedback there from both of us, and the starting up side as well. And I have to agree with you, Ellen, we bring a lot of pressure onto ourselves and can make it a lot more stressful than what it needs to be. And I think that some of the steps that we can share over this presentation will hopefully open everybody's eyes to what's able to be achieved, and not allowing ourselves to assume that landlords are just going to make these decisions that they're going to change, because the chances are, if we've got really good open communication, they won't, and they'll be very adaptable to supporting our next stage for them.
That's right. That's exactly right. Yeah.
So we've got our must-dos to kick things off. Now, the business plan side was one of the points that I had certainly put in there myself, and something I'm sure that you completely agree with as well. And that's quite a good generalised topic. And it's not that you're just going to be saying, yes, I'm starting a property management business, and this is the marketing that I'll do, and just having all these little facets all over the place. You actually need to have a structured plan that you sign off, and that gives you then that accountability to be taking action from that plan as well. And as part of your business plan, that's where you're going to be creating the entity structure. So I'd love for you to touch on that a bit there, Ellen, as well as the importance of getting that right in the beginning.
Yeah, so thanks, Tara. One of the things that often happens when you're handling a rent roll sale is that landlords get a little bit unsettled as they're being, quite often they feel like they're kind of being shunted from one agency to another, especially if the communication's not great. And that can really impact the sale price of a rent roll. So that impacts both parties, both the acquiring agency. They want to get as many properties as they can because they're buying the rent roll. And it also impacts the selling agency because they don't get as big a sale price if all of the landlords don't come across. So one way to help set up your rent roll to maximise the sale process at the end is to talk to your business lawyer about setting up a separate untraded entity. And the idea behind this is, if you set up a separate entity that is separate to your existing maybe PTY Ltd company, what you'll do is you'll have this brand new entity that's often a trust structure, and you'll sign all your agency agreements or your Form 6s within that structure. And when it comes time to sell the rent roll, rather than having to re-sign all these agency agreements or your Form 6s with the new agency, you can actually sell the entire trust structure.
Mm-hmm.
And while it doesn't guarantee 100% retention, it saves an awful lot of work in that transition process, and it just helps keep landlords settled because they don't have to re-sign paperwork.
Mm-hmm.
So I've seen that work a little bit better for agencies. So I usually just suggest to people who are starting rent rolls, just talk to your business lawyer and ask them about setting up an untraded entity for your rent roll. So that's the key word to ask for, and they'll know a bit more about how that works.
And I think the other great point that you have mentioned is talking to people that are qualified in those set fields. We tend to think there'll be an expense there and I can't afford to do it because I'm setting up. You can't not afford to do it, really, because you're just creating such a big drama for the end process. So your business lawyer that you touched on, and I'd probably suggest having a good chat with your accountant as well.
Exactly. Yeah, that's right.
And
that's right, because you want to get these things set up from the start.
And making sure that they know what's going on and demonstrating to them your business plan, being really open about that. I think that having that transparency makes a big difference. And a lot of quality business plans won't just be 2 or 3 pages long. I'm sure you found the same as well, Ellen. They're 15, 20-something pages long. And you will feel like you're probably repeating yourself in a few areas, but the more detail you put in there, the higher chance that you can actually look back at that business plan in the next 3, 5, 10 years and go, wow, I actually did everything that I had set out to, or I've missed something, but I can implement that now, and that'll make a big difference. Growth structure is immensely important in knowing how you want to grow, and I would suggest that you're on the same path too, Ellen, unless there's another type of structure in the property management business that I've missed. But we've got our pods, we've got our portfolio, and we've got task-based. So your pod is where you've got 2 people working on one portfolio. And the idea behind that is that obviously if someone goes on holidays, then the other person's there. So the client doesn't feel left out of the loop. They know they're talking to 2 people. Or if that person tends to leave the office, which we see a lot of transitioning in the property management business as well. Portfolio too. That's an individual person. So again, very valuable for communication-wise. Investors really love to know they're talking to one person, but also risky then if they leave or go on holidays, vice versa. And then task-based, everyone has their own set task. So you have an entry condition report, an exit person, you have a routine inspection, you have maintenance. Is there a golden answer that there's one that everyone should do? Not really.
It's really not, is there? Because it really depends on your business and the people you've got within your team.
Absolutely. And I think the best thing to do is, as the business owner, you need to make the decision around what you're going to manage, because not just what the team wants. If you go based on what the team wants and then half of that team changes over the next 12 months, then you've created a structure around individuals and not around the growth of the business. So I'd probably suggest, if I was going to share a personal opinion, I am favouring the pod and the portfolio and do see benefit in the pod. I worry with the task base that there's obviously always conversations around how the communication goes between each individual. But the other area I find that is challenging, and I'm happy for you to share your experience in this too, Ellen, is that if you need to replace someone that's a full-time maintenance officer, that's a very unique role. Not everyone wants to be full-time maintenance officer, So it's already hard enough to find a property manager, let alone find a full-time maintenance officer. Would you tend to see?
Exactly. Yeah, look, I have a soft spot for the pod.
Yeah.
Structure, just because there are 2 people, and it allows landlords really like consistency of contact, and I think landlords prefer just one contact, but they'll cope with 2. And certainly the businesses I've worked in and when I've owned businesses, the pod structure seems to be the one that's most sustainable from what I've seen.
Yeah. And it's really starting to take off, I find, in businesses that are that 500, 700, 1,000 plus, that are really projecting up there, and they're getting a bit more control around, and we'll be talking about it later on in the lead generation side, in getting more leads out of their current clients because they're having better communication with them. And it's, that's then not necessarily down to the BDM to manage that, because the pods can do it themselves. So you're getting exceptional value out of all your staff. Systems and procedures. So for myself, to touch on that one briefly, we use systems in the business. Jade had purchased into many programs, which is why I'm a huge advocate for it. And I know yourself, Ellen, in your business, and I do in mine, we offer tools to help our clients. So that way, when we make suggestions, they can go out and use those tools and do what they need to do. And I think that's from being able to experience that myself in the past, and knowing the benefit of that was part of the reason why I wanted to create a really business development, focused module there. So I have to 100% agree that systems and procedures are really important. And what I wanted to touch on as well is the introduction of the staff member when they're coming new into the business. So say, they start with yourself, Ellen, and they're a one-man band initially. They're the business owner, and then they get to their 100 plus properties and go, okay, well, I want to keep growing, but I need that next person on board. What are some of the suggestions that you share how they're going to introduce that person into the business?
Yeah, so quite often when I'm working with a client, we are looking at something that we'll cover a little bit further in this webinar, whether to actually bring another team member in or whether to outsource some tasks. So as a one-man band is growing, we're actively looking at what's going to be the best option for them in their business. But I know that for me, when I started my rent roll, as I started to build in systems and procedures, I really thought about, how do I want this to look when I have a bigger rent roll? So I wanted to have a system, even though I was the only person in my business, and even though I knew how to do everything, I just wanted a step-by-step system that I knew that I could pass on, and just so that there was consistency in the level of care that my clients received, whether it was from me or whether it was from a staff member down the track. So I think you need to, even right at the beginning when you've only got one property, you need to decide to have a system on how we do things.
Yeah, and it can be as simple as to just processing the accounts in the business, and the role of, I know some businesses will just have it processed down as to how the mailing process works. It can be that simplified.
Yeah.
And then also having refined job descriptions. So obviously when you decide on your growth structure, then when you're going to have those roles come up, whichever, style of growth path you decide on with the growth structure, you would then have a full business development job description, leasing consultant, because they do tend to be separate roles. And then if you've got the pod, put everything in there of what the pods will do and how those roles can be split across the two people. If you go task-based, then what those individual tasks are going to be, and be able to hand a package over to the employee that's coming into the business, so they feel as though that they are getting that proper introduction and not just getting a whole heap of files dumped on their table. That's my biggest concern for the industry, and I see it happen far too often in the larger scale businesses, is that they want to have top performing property managers coming into the business and building and helping with this rent roll, but they're not looking after them, they're not nurturing them, they're not giving them the tools that they need to understand their vision and business concept. They're just expecting them to know.
That's exactly right.
Yeah,
that's right. That's right.
And then the other risk that we have on the other side is that they are then getting burnt out, and we're losing quality people. We're losing very, very strong people that could be exceptional in our industry and achieve great things, and unfortunately they're then, looking at other areas, and going into other different types of businesses, and that can be into accounting and different areas as well. So we really need to, I think if you're a business owner that's watching this recording today, think about what your introduction is for that next person, whether it be you've just started yourself or you've got multiple staff. How are they being introduced to the business? Are you having a bit of a celebration, having some excitement around it? maybe having cake on that day. I'm not sure. It could be a lot of fun, but, you know, just something that is a really, really nice warm welcome and gets them off to the right start very quickly. So we're coming up next to preparing for a future sale and knowing your entry and exit strategy. So Ellen, you have been the expert start to finish. I'll let you kick off and do that opening with that one there for us of the entry and the exit strategy and some key points that you'd share with our followers today.
Yeah, sure. So I think we all go into our businesses feeling really excited, and we do tend to do a bit of planning up front. But I think where the planning often fails is with the exit strategy. So quite often the agents that I meet are, you know, starting their own agencies, and that's really exciting and all the planning there, but they're not really thinking about one day I won't want to do this anymore. You know, even if it's one day I'm just going to retire altogether, one day I won't be doing this. So I think it's really important to keep that in mind as you set up, because you want to set out to make the exit for yourself as easy as possible. And I know, speaking from my own experience, when I sold my rent roll, it was, I sold in a place where I needed to move locations to be close to a family member who was not well. So I was still able to be available to the purchasing agent for a couple of months. But if I'd had a bit more notice or a bit more planning, I would have spent more time with the purchasing agent. So, and I really hadn't thought that through. And in hindsight, that's something I would do differently, even though the sale of my rent roll happened a little sooner than I planned for it to happen, just because, you know, family members get sick and sometimes you need to move. But in hindsight, I would have been thinking through my exit strategy the entire time. Who would I like to sell to?
Yes.
And how would I like the handover process to work? What sort of price am I looking to achieve? Then how can I make sure that my rent roll reflects that value? And I would be constantly working on that while owning the rent roll. Because I just think that exit, you know, it's the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow that so many agents are looking for, because the rent roll is so highly valued, but we don't give it any focus while we own the rent roll. And I just think you need to be thinking about that constantly. What am I doing now that will make the exit easier?
Absolutely. And what I liked is you touched on the points there too of the who am I going to sell to? Because you can grow an exceptional size rent roll, but the people in your area of socioeconomic might not be able to afford it. You know, so you could build a rent roll that has 500, 700, 1,000 managements, and that can be an amazing achievement. However, to sell it as that size, it's very expensive, and not everybody is necessarily prepared to relocate to a location. And then again, other business owners, if there's other people that are in the industry that consider buying it, or somebody coming into the industry, it can be a rather large exercise. Now, I know for Jade, who I work for with Prestige Properties, we had a 600 plus rent roll that was sold there, and for her, she was quite fortunate that the rent roll had actually been split into two suburbs. So on the Fraser Coast, we have Maryborough and Hervey Bay. And then what had happened was, when she listed it for sale, the discussion that we both had, we were thinking, who's going to be able to afford to buy this, you know, in our area? And there wasn't as many larger rent rolls. There were some that were quite similar in size and some that were a lot smaller too, but there wasn't really any major buyers or that around that we were aware of. And then there's the other fear of, when you sell it, will they provide the same level of service, and if not better, than what you're providing as well? So I know that she certainly considers herself to be quite lucky to have been able to split that, because it would have been hard and she would have had to wait a lot longer to have got buyers than what she did within that 6-month period, which is very quick on the scheme of things in a rent roll sale, to be able to sell it. And it's because she had a separate buyer in Hervey Bay and a separate buyer in Maryborough, and then it was split in half. Now, obviously, going into the rest of the presentation later on, I'll certainly expand on that as to the type of communication that is really important to have, because You then have potentially owners that actually have properties in both portfolios and explaining to them that it's going to two different businesses. So that'll be a fun one to extend on later. But you've really got to know in the beginning, and I think that she would agree, and I know that she got very lucky because the idea was build, 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 you know, and get it as big as we can and apply for awards, and we won some fantastic awards through the PPM group. And I know you've just been to that conference, which is a fantastic event that we have here in Queensland on the Gold Coast, and we were very fortunate to be able to do that. But never in Jade's wildest dreams did she imagine that once she got it to a fantastic size, the challenges that could come with the sale. So you've got to you know, really, really consider that and what you can, I guess, pull off and sell separately as well. So that probably touches definitely on researching the area too. My feedback on that is use Census and other programs that we have online that they're going to give you as many statistics as possible. If you're a Queensland-based agent, we are so blessed to have fantastic information through the RTA, Residential Tenancy Authority website, where with all of our bonds that are collected, they share that data for us online, so you can actually get pretty close to the exact amount of number of investment properties that are in that postcode. That's something that you've looked at yourself, haven't you, Ellen?
Yeah, so I was very mindful of, as I was looking to exit my rent roll, I was very mindful of who do I want to sell to, and being aware of there are certain agencies that can afford to buy rent rolls and there are certain agencies that can't. And as you touched on just before, you need to make sure that it's going to be an agency that's able to deliver the service. Otherwise, the landlords won't stay, and that impacts your sale price. So certainly for me, when I had decided to sell, I just rang my biggest competitor and we negotiated a sale over coffee, which I know is not always the norm, but it certainly made it easier. I knew who would be able to offer comparable service to me.
Yeah, it's a very interesting point you raised there, because obviously once you open that conversation, well, then they know that's your next step if it's what they don't want. But in a lot of cases, especially of the size that it sounds like that they would have been quite happy to then have taken on that extra bit of the portfolio income-wise. So you can certainly actually do that as well. So in the very beginning, very strong research of the area and making sure that the suburb that you're going into, you know, it's a great idea. I mean, I live in Hervey Bay. It's a beautiful spot. I know you live just past the Gold Coast. Is that right, Ellen, still?
Yeah, down at Coolangatta.
And we live in fantastic areas. However, sometimes where you choose to live might not necessarily be the best place to have a rent roll or, you know, a property management business. In fact, it might not have as many investment properties as you believe that it should and does. And there might be other areas that could be an hour's driving distance or close by that you're quite happy to run a business from and are going to actually be greater an opportunity of leads that are available as investment properties. So there definitely in the beginning needs to be that clear setup, because if you go in to a suburb and you just think they've just got so many investment properties, and then it's an area where you might have, let's say, 10 property management businesses, but there's only 3,000 investment properties available, that's not the best market to be starting a property management business in. So it's really important to do that in the very beginning. And the last point that we've got here on preparing for future sale is conducting your own audit on your files. This, and I'll jump in first, Ellen, is something that worked really well in Jade's business, and I believe it prepared, as much as there were stressful parts, and, you know, I'm hoping that we can share this today with everyone and it really helps people avoid that pain in the future. But the one thing she did do very well was spot audits on the individual portfolio managers, because we had portfolio managers across the team. And by doing that, she was abreast of knowing everything that was going on in everyone's portfolio when they were having struggles. If there were QCAT cases, or obviously they've got all their own different names and stuff around Australia for people that are listening in different states. When you're going to court, she knew about all those cases. She knew about the arrears where we were sitting. She knew about the lease renewals, how many were on periodic leases. This was stuff that she reviewed consistently, and by doing the spot audit, it put the property manager on the spot. So then they knew to be ready all the time to potentially be having that conversation with her. And I think that was a great thing, that they knew that she was interested and that she wanted to help. and then they were more open in sharing when things were going wrong rather than just kind of brushing it, you know, under the table and worrying that it was going to get them into big strife. So that for me, I feel gave her great value while, you know, we still come across things that weren't so great when it came to the final end of the sale process. I believe it prepared her much better for that compared to most business owners that haven't had that touch point as well. Is there anything you want to add on that part there too, Ellen?
Yeah, that's my feeling as
Yeah.
well, Tara. I would just rather find the problems myself before I had someone else doing due diligence on my rent roll. I would much rather find the problems. So yeah, I think as Jade did in your business, I think that's amazing to be doing that throughout the entire business ownership. But especially as you get ready to sell it, you need to be doing an audit on your files, because the problems are going to appear in the due diligence reports. So you might as well find them out and fix them straight away. But to be able to do that through the life of your rent roll, that's just gold.
And we found the system that we're using as well showed us where they were ticking off on their checklists and everything too. So you could see what was in red, what was in green. It was very, very transparent. And that obviously goes back to the systems and procedures side, but it just makes such a big difference. And then when you are handing that over to the next agent, they can obviously see that transparency as well. And like you said, what you don't want is for them to find stuff, because they will then use that against you and negotiate on your already agreed price. They will start to knock you down, which is the last thing you want to have happen.
Yeah. That's right.
Where to start looking for leads. So, you know, we've got to give some gold here today, Ellen. We are talking start to finish, but there will be lead generation, and, you know, there will be prospecting, and there will be tough days, and there will be great days. And this is the joy of property management and every little aspect that kind of comes into that. So one of the key points that I wanted to touch on was communicate, mingle and present, which probably sounds like a lot of interesting words put together, and where is Tara's head going with this? But if you really want to start to see some genuine leads coming into your business as a progression versus you having to chase all the time, then you need to start right from the very beginning in being a strong communicator. So strong communication, obviously, over the phone if you're talking to cold prospects, but also face-to-face meetings that you're having with referral opportunities. So that can be networking events that you attend, or other local business contacts that you sit down, have a conversation with, and create referral relationships with as well. And then you've got your external builders and developers and your current clients that are within the business too. And then the second point is obviously mingling with them. So don't think that when you have one conversation that you're best buddies and that everything will be shared. It has to have consistency of talking points between each other, and genuinely being interested in the product and service that they offer, listening for opportunities with your clients and recommending them, because you'll be surprised at how much your clients will have such a large amount of respect for yourself when they know that they have got someone that's recommending them to someone that's actually looking after their investment property and that they know and trust them as well. People love to be able to have all the answers in one meeting rather than having to leave and go do research themselves. And that obviously then comes into be able to present. You need to be able to present a listing presentation, but you also need to be able to present yourself as the expert in your field, in your marketplace, and demonstrate that through your marketing, through the videos that you do, through the blogs that you write, through the people that you connect with. But also, if you get the opportunity to work in with, say, local accountants and solicitors and planners and insurance companies, and you put on an event together, then you talk about what you do and what you're passionate about in the industry as well. So, you know, there's a lot of you having to put yourself out there. And I feel that sometimes that's the missing link for people, is that they want to sit back, they get a few no's, and there's a bit of fear then, and they want to sit back and hope the lead's going to come in. And if you don't put your name out there, the person next door to you down the road is going to be doing that, and they're going to get those leads. So when it comes to startup business, Ellen, within your role, that would be, I would assume, very similar of talking points that you're having with your clients as well.
Absolutely. I I think if you want to start your rent roll, you just need to be talking to people.
Yeah.
And that's how I started. I started my rent roll in an area where I didn't know anyone. I had just moved to the area, and so I was really looking for who has access to my landlords before they're my landlords. So as you said, solicitors, conveyancers, mortgage brokers, financial planners, but as you said, it needs to be a reciprocal relationship as well. You can't just be looking for them to refer to you. You need to be looking for opportunities to help them grow their business as well, because it needs to be a two-way street, and there needs to be relationship there. And I know that for me, I used to like quite informal networking, and I loved doing coffee with people one-on-one because I like to build that close relationship with another business owner. So, you know, putting those people into your CRM package to make sure that you're following them up on a regular basis and doing coffee with them on a regular basis, and maybe contributing an article in their newsletter and letting them contribute an article in your newsletter, so that you're helping each other get access to each other's database. That's by far the quickest way to get leads through your door, is by meeting people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that when you're open to doing that and you go to these networking events, you'll be surprised. A lot of people are in quite fear, because in some cases they might be going by themselves. If you know of another business contact, it's great to be able to go along with them, because you can meet their friends as well. But the people that are going there actually genuinely want to meet other people, and may not know why yet, may not, you know, have 100% reason as to why they're there, but they actually might have the same situation as you, where they're new to the area and they do want to meet other business contacts. So the best thing that you can do is be the person to start the conversation, rather than one hiding behind the scenes, because otherwise it's just going to be, everybody will be doing that. And I know I've made some fantastic friendships, and absolutely, I know my personality, I can see it in your personality too. Ellen, it's much easier to talk to people face to face than it is over the phone, because you can see their genuine interest in the conversation that you're having. So I love networking events. I love taking people out for coffee and lunches as well, and I found that to be quite an easy way to just be really interested in knowing more about what is happening in other people's lives as well, and to be able to use that to our advantage, to be able to share with our prospects too, is a big thing.
Yeah.
Now, purchasing data can happen on so many different levels. There's obviously a company that I know we have had as a fantastic sponsor across our national tour called Winning Edge Ownership Data, and we've also had RP Data as well. I believe that they also still sell data too, our CoreLogic, and there's certainly a lot of those options out there. When you're purchasing data and utilising systems along those lines, it's only as good as the individual. So it's a great thing if you purchase it, but you really need to get on there, get on the phone, use the contacts that you're purchased, and obviously correspond that with the letters that you can also send out if that's the form of marketing that you want to do. However, Ellen, some states don't offer that, and I know that we're going to jump into some outsourcing very soon. Is that something that you can expand on in the next slide, that you are able to do data mining with some outsourcing as well?
Oh yeah, you certainly could. And yeah, I'm happy to talk a little bit more about how to use a virtual assistant in that capacity.
And we'll certainly, yeah, we've got that coming up in the next slide as well. But I just think that if you're going to purchase data, absolutely, it can be a great way. It's going to be a cold call, and the best, you know, way to approach that is to explain to them that you're genuinely interested in speaking with people in the area about the investment property industry. Do you have an investment property yourself? What has been your experience in the last 12 months, whether it be buying, selling or leasing, and trying to have some warm, open conversations there as well. The digital marketing side, so touching on Facebook, social media there, Ellen?
Yeah, so digital marketing's becoming a lot more prevalent at the moment, and there are a few things that I suggest to my clients, and one is in relation to their website, just making sure that their website is current, and by current I mean constantly being updated. So because Google scans through your website at least once a day to check if you've got new content on there, and Google wants to be providing useful information to the people who are using it, and if you're not updating your website with new articles and blogs and videos and things that Google will see to be useful, Google won't favour your website.
Absolutely.
The other thing I suggest to people with their website is making sure that your homepage has a strong call to action above the fold. Now, above the fold is if you just click on a website and it opens up.
First part, yep.
Whatever you can see without having to scroll down is above the fold. So I strongly suggest to people, figure out what you want people to do once they get to your website, and have a call to action. Tell them what you want them to do. So certainly for me, with my website, I want to capture people's name and email address. So my website, if you go to my website, you'll see that above the fold is a strong, compelling statement offering you some free information in return for your email address. And I encourage people to do a similar thing on their website. If you want to capture people's names and email addresses to go into your database so that you can communicate with them, ask them for it as soon as they get to your website by giving them something valuable in exchange for their website, for their email address.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think there will also continue.
I was going to say, it doesn't need to also be that's the first thing, like we want them to do it first, but it's not the only thing that they have to do on the website either. So you can still have it there, but have the rest of your website there too.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Because people will scroll and they want to see that they can click on other things on your website. But I think you want to make it very clear what you want people to do once they're on your website, because otherwise people just have a little look around and then they leave again. And we really want to capture their data.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that we can communicate with them.
So we're going to capture their data first and then the value-added content. Now, I know that both you and I have been quite good at that, is putting lots of blogs and updating blogs is a big thing, and I know that we both do that well, and video and as much valuable content there as well. But some people get quite scared in getting in front of the camera, Ellen, and it's something that I'm going to be talking about with one of my future updates that I do with tips that I'm doing in my business. Is you don't need to be afraid about being in front of the camera. So what have you found that's helped you with that?
Sure. So I still sometimes get nervous being in front of the camera, but what I've realised is maybe the nerves are never going to go away, and I've just become a little bit more comfortable having the nerves. So the nerves aren't as scary as they used to be. I used to be quite uncomfortable, but I think it's just about having a bit of practice, and we all have mobile phones that have cameras on them, so there's a really great opportunity for you to just practice. You can record a video. You don't have to upload it, but you can have a couple of practices. But sooner or later, you just have to use one of them because it's never going to be perfect. So you've just got to work on progress before perfection. Yeah,
I found a trick that worked really well for me is I've recruited people in. So I've had my sister help me in the past, and I've got a great guy, Stuart, who I work with now that does videos with me, which has been wonderful. And I struggled initially with the looking down at the camera to the point where you had to press start, come back, and then I mentally that's where it would be a stressful point for me. But the moment I had somebody else do it for me, I was fine because I was in the zone ready, and I just had that extra person, and they've obviously then had to sit there through it, me doing my recording. But for that short space of time of doing it, I just found that I was getting too distracted and worried about the start and the finish and not focusing on the content that I need to say. So if you can recruit someone else in your team to be that press start person, that might be another, way. I know it's helped me overcome it. But it can certainly help others out there as well, because we have so much valuable content that we can share. And people are looking at videos now. Blogs are still great, and I love writing blogs, and I know you've got some fabulous blogs on your website too, Ellen. But I think it's good to have the variation because people will choose video over blogs now as well.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And I know that nowadays, if you're posting any of your videos on Facebook, you can add the captions to your videos now,
I have seen
and Facebook does that for you.
So how have you been doing that on your videos, Ellen?
Yeah, I've just started. So it's quite simple. You just upload the video, and once the video is uploaded, you can actually go in, hit edit, and there is a captions section, and it populates the captions based on what it thinks you said.
Yeah.
And it's a really easy process to go through and just double check that it has correctly understood you.
Oh,
It
yes.
does not get it right all the time. I think one of my last videos had me swearing quite a few times.
Oh, wow.
And that's not what I said.
Be careful.
But you just go in and and then it does it for you. So, and captions are quite popular because
Yes.
we can pause the video without having to count them, so you can do it at work.
Yeah, you can just and read the few points there and think, you know what, that's something I am genuinely interested in, versus looking at it and going, I'll get back to it later, and then it goes down the news feed and too late. Yes. So the one that you're talking about with the captions, you do that on Facebook, where you
yeah.
Okay, excellent. So
and I know that YouTube has a functionality too.
Oh, great. So just in the edit section, choosing the captions and check first.
Yep.
Check first.
Yes. Don't send it live. They will have got a few of the words wrong.
Excellent. That's very, very good advice. It'll put people off of videos for life.
Oh, yes, it would.
Now, introducing a new team member or outsourcing. I'm going to let you go full steam ahead with this one, Ellen, because I've probably got more smaller bits to add on this side of the slide, and I'm looking forward to hearing your take on your experience.
Sure. Well, Tara, feel free to jump in anytime, but this is something that I'm really passionate about, and it's largely because I discovered outsourcing in my business because as I grew, I hired a part-time assistant and she fell pregnant and went and had a baby. And then I hired another part-time assistant who fell pregnant and had a baby. And I started, like, it was lovely for them and their babies were beautiful. But I started to think, how am I supposed to grow if I'm so reliant on people for everything? And I mean, outsourcing is people, but if I'm so reliant on just one staff member for everything. So I started to look at what could I do to alleviate my workload without being reliant wholly and solely on one single person. So there's sort of 5 bullet points I've put here about the order in which that I suggest that you consider outsourcing or using a team member, and I do have a download that we'll send to all of the viewers today that takes you through these questions in much more detail. So the first question I always ask is there some software or technology that could help your workload before you hire someone? So I would imagine that most of us are familiar with the Inspect Real Estate software and the Maintenance Manager software. So for me, I actually used Inspect Real Estate in my business, and I would say that my call volume dropped by about 70%. So I was getting all these phone calls in, inquiring on properties that I had for lease, until I implemented some software that helped manage those phone calls. So that was a massive time saving for me, and it meant that I didn't need a person doing that job. I could get technology to do it for me, and that was something that I knew that I would leave and keep within my business as it grew. So it was technology that I was going to have anyway, so I just brought it in before I hired a staff member. I then suggest to people that if you're looking to save yourself some time, look at white label products. So white label products are pre-written content usually, so it might be like some of your products, Tara, where you've got pre-written marketing tools and templates and business plans and those sorts of things, so that you don't have to, so that people don't have to create them themselves. You've got pre-written content that is proven to work. My product contains pre-written landlord newsletters and tenant newsletters and blog posts, so that's a good way of having the content available without having to write it yourself, so that you don't have to reinvent the wheel.
And I'm a huge fan of your newsletters. If anyone that's watching this is keen on getting a proper newsletter that you don't have to invest too much time, definitely speak with Ellen. They are very professional. You're doing a great job with them.
Thanks so much, Tara. We really like writing them.
Yeah.
And it was the thing that I needed in my business. So I just never had time. I certainly never had time to write a tenant newsletter. So that's why I've implemented that now. And if I got too busy, the landlord newsletter was the first thing that I dropped. So I really created the landlord and tenant newsletters because they were the things that I needed in my business.
Absolutely.
And then what I look at doing next with people is once you've figured out whether or not there's software and technology that can help your business, whether or not there's some white label or pre-written content that you can use, I then get people to look at, well, what tasks do we need done so that we can figure out whether some of the tasks can be performed remotely, so performed by someone who's not in your office, and whether some tasks need to be completed in the office or are relationship tasks. So you never want to outsource your business development tasks. That needs to be done by someone who's in the office, who gets the office, who can have a relationship with people. But you can outsource your telephone answering. So that's something I did. I used a company based in Sydney to answer my phone for me, and they answered it as though they were sitting in my office with me. They could take messages or transfer the call for me, and my clients never knew. Some of my clients, I think, figured out that I didn't have a team of 12 receptionists, but mostly they didn't know, and it meant that my phone was answered whether I was there or not, whether a receptionist was there or not. It was just constantly answered, and I didn't have to worry about it.
And I've heard with that too,
so that's
Ellen,
how I look at it.
Sorry, you can switch it on and off too. So with some of those companies, so you don't have to have them running full time. You know, you can just put them on when you're out and you know you can't be interrupted, and then switch it back, and then people can get you directly.
That's exactly right. It works as though they are in the office with you.
Yeah.
And they get to know your business as well, so they get to understand what sort of questions they should ask people who are calling in, and they get a bit familiar with your business, like they are actually working in it.
Absolutely.
Well, so that's sort of the order in which I look at whether to hire or whether to outsource. And there are some things that you just cannot outsource. No. And having real relationships and real conversations with tenants and landlords, you can't outsource that. You can outsource your trust accounting because your landlords and your tenants don't see it, but you can't outsource the relationships. So that's how I decide whether or not we need to hire a person in the office or whether we should consider outsourcing it. And then you need to decide whether you're going to outsource it offshore, perhaps to someone in the Philippines, or whether you outsource to a company that's based here in Australia. And it really depends on what your needs are and what your comfort levels are as well.
And the expense side too would vary, I would think. So what you're prepared to pay. The other point I wanted to throw in there was making sure, even if whether you're going to employ a staff member or outsource, you still need a system and procedure. You still need a clear direction. You still need clear instructions. So it's not that outsourcing are just a complete easy way out and they're expected to know. You need to still do the initial stuff and then give them those clear instructions in the very beginning. And especially if you're going to someone overseas, you might have to spend a bit more time with them, getting those clear instructions across. So we touched on too, doing data mining. So that's something that can be done through outsourcing as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I know that certainly for me, I have an assistant who's based in the Philippines, and she's fantastic with data collection and data mining. So once you show them how to do it and exactly how you want it done, and that's usually done via Skype or a meeting like this where you actually share your screen and show what's done and they do it back to demonstrate that they know how to do it, then they're really good at repeating that process. And certainly from a cost perspective, working with an assistant in the Philippines is significantly cheaper than working with someone here in the office. And for those sorts of tasks, those admin type tasks, it makes sense to get someone who's a little bit more affordable to perform those tasks for you.
And they're really a blank canvas. It doesn't matter if you hire a staff member that comes into the business or you outsource. The energy that you put into them, the time, that's what value you're going to get back. So if you're prepared to do it properly, you're going to get amazing results. But I really do hope people take that time to download your information there with the outsourcing side. I know you've got a great attachment as part of that, because Ellen, it's probably an area that people talk about, but we're not quite there yet in Australia, and across property management, because there is a lot of fear around the trust account side of handing that over, and the trust side, and I think you can still, as a business owner, still protect yourself in checking. It's not that you're completely shutting yourself off altogether. I would still suggest, if you felt you need to even just assess it daily. Just don't be the person doing the active implementation side, or more the reviewing side.
Exactly.
So,
yeah, absolutely. Because whether it's someone in your office or it's someone in the Philippines, it's still your license on the line. So you still have to take the same level of precautions regardless of where that person is sitting.
Yes, absolutely. Now we're coming up to how to approach the acquisition process, and we've got a great buyer tip in here from yourself, Ellen, of over-service and over-communicate. Share with us that one.
Sure. So what I found is when you're buying a rent roll, the landlords are really unsettled as they come across, because they often feel like they didn't really get to make a choice about changing agencies. So they, for some reason, expect that you need to be as good, but in most cases a little bit better than their previous agent, because they tend to be very harsh in their criticism of you because you're the new agent that they didn't even choose. So my tip is, with those new landlords, you just need to deliver an even better service and even better communication with them, because they're going to be a harsher critic than if they had chosen you themselves. So I just think if you can over-service them, over-communicate with them, that will just help them feel settled and safe with your agency.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, though, the team needs to be excited about the change, and if their portfolios are being adjusted and they're taking on some more property, they need to be supporting that warm introduction. They need to be excited about the step forward in the business, not just down to the business owner coming and saying, we're taking on these properties, this is what you need to do. That there needs to be a bit of a celebration there, and how everybody's involved. On the seller side, which is probably the more stressful, because, I mean, as the buyer, when you find things, you've got the opportunity to go back and say, well, I'm not happy about this, I want to renegotiate on this property. I'm not happy on this, I want to renegotiate here. The seller is going to be in a far more stressful situation, and that's where I've kind of talked about, not sweating the small stuff. And I got to go through that experience with Jade, 600 plus portfolio, split across 2 businesses. We personally, over a 2-week period, called every single landlord. So even if we left a message, we then set a task to then a few days later try them again, or the next day, depending on who the individual was and the communication that we were having with them. It was a very thorough process. It was actually quite an enjoyable and rewarding process, because it allowed us to tell them exactly what was happening. So with one portfolio that was part of it that was going off, it was the staff were not going with it and they were meeting new people. And then the other one, the team was going. So you've got 2 different types of communication that's happening. And I found the fact of when the team were going with that property, it was a very easy conversation to have, because the only thing that was changing was the business name. Both rent rolls went to franchises, and I was quite amazed in my experience as to the feedback of, oh, well, we've had a bad experience with them in the past in Sydney or in Perth, and you think, oh, hang on, well, it's a completely different business owner. So it's quite funny sometimes how people will attach that or somebody else's experience to that franchise, and that will stick with them. However, we were able to get through those conversations quite well, and then also created that warm introduction too. So one of the advantages were that while one of the portfolios the staff weren't going across, there was a particular staff member who did still work within that business for the first 6 months. So we explained that, you know, while we're making that initial introduction now, this gentleman is going to stay there for 6 months. And Jade is going to keep him on in that time to make sure it is a smooth transition process, that everything that we are telling you will happen and is going to happen, and that's part of our promise to you, and we're going to stick to be part of that. And look, while it was a long time and there was certainly moments where it was very tiring, it made such a big difference on the retention side. And I know that for Jade, you know, there weren't very many that said no, there weren't very many that pulled out, and then obviously there's a loss of income opportunity there, and they became quite adaptable because of that, because of knowing that we were prepared to take that time to have the communication. But what I will say is if you do have, and this is something we were wary of, that they're email contact only, that you still do that. Don't pick up the phone if they've made that suggestion for email. Encourage a conversation with them if they choose to, but still stick to their same requirements, you know, and just make your communication nice and clear through that, because that could put them offside if you start trying to do something new and different.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you had to add onto that side, on the selling side there, Ellen?
Yeah, look, just that warm introduction, I think, is where it's really valuable. I know that for me, as I sold my rent roll, I called through all of my clients to let them know what was happening. And as you explained, if you can explain what's going on, they feel a little bit more at ease when they know that they're being told what's happening.
Oh, yeah. And look, my parents have investment properties, and my mum brought one of the changeover letters to me. So what you were talking about, where you can try to avoid that in the beginning, she received one of those, and she said, oh, you know, they're selling, and I'm not sure if I should stay or what I should do. So that was her instant, you know, process and thought already for my parents. And I said to them, well, you know, who's the rent roll going to? And then she showed me all the information. I said, well, they're actually, I remember them. They're a good agency in the area because it's within our Fraser Coast. And I kind of talked her through it, and it got me thinking, that agency only did the letter. They never did the communication. So it would have been interesting for additional clients to have experienced that. And, you know, once I explained to my mum and dad, the worst thing that can happen is you can experience this new business, and if it's not for you, you've still got your termination clause in place. You've still got that there if things go pear-shaped. It doesn't change just because you've transferred over. So yeah, it definitely, they, you know, were quite settled, but it would be interesting to know others that may not have been without having that communication as well. And I would hate, as the business owner, to just kind of be sitting there each day when the mail comes in, hoping that those signed off agreements and letters are going to arrive. Because if you don't have that,
that would make me so nervous.
And by doing the call, it helped us encourage that. So we would talk through and say, well, you can send it via email here, or you can fax here, because we still had faxes then, or you can post here. You know, we had all that happening. So certainly much more encouraging of speeding up the process versus sitting back and waiting. And that seems to be the theme really throughout our presentation today, is that you need to, if you're wanting to get results from start to finish, you need to be prepared to make that call. You need to be prepared to put yourself out there to get the response. So during the handover process, systems and procedures from the start to finish, getting the team on board, and the process is only as stressful as you are. So I know that we've probably touched on quite a few of these in addition to the topic points that we've had throughout the presentation. Definitely the team on board is a huge thing, massive, and sometimes even considering providing some incentives around that if you're the selling business as well. Because the more that you can encourage them to get them across, and then you know, have that higher retention side, then why not reward those that have helped you do that, and give them some genuine thank you on that side of it as well. Again, just taking that time to check the files before you hand them over. And in fact, probably even, as you mentioned, Ellen, before you start the due diligence process. And if you're a person coming in to buy, make sure you pick the files. I've been amazed how many that have said to the selling agent, just pick some for me. Well, I can tell you, if you ask them to pick, they're going to pick their best damn files.
Yes. Yeah, you want it to be random.
Yes. Because
Yeah.
that's, if you can at least gauge, and look, I'd probably suggest more than 10, but to start with 10 and be really refined with those first. The ones that you randomly pick across that portfolio, that's going to give you a true indication of what you're about to take on, where there might be a handful that are great, but the ones that aren't so great are going to give you that buffer of understanding of what you can expect.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm.
Yeah, you want to get a good feel for what you're acquiring, so that you know what condition this rent roll is in.
And technology, I think, is such a big player now. You know, the last thing, if you're a business that's cloud-based and you've got everything online, the last thing you want to do is to walk into a property management business that isn't cloud-based and they've still got 7 filing cabinets filled with files. And this is the times that
Yeah.
we're in now, and something obviously for Jade where she was quite fortunate, you know, we were still at a stage where we started to do the cloud, but it wasn't massive yet, so she certainly got away with it. I mean, the amount of files that went across to these offices was insane, and just triple checking over them and making sure it was, you know, all right. Whereas now the process can be as stressful as you're allowed to be. If you prepare your business earlier and you make it cloud-based, then the transition will be far smoother than what it will be for an office that's all paper-based.
That's right.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's right.
So clear systems in the beginning, and really, you know, you create that vision, you create that future of how it's going to end up and going to look. And probably the last point I want to add is if you are a sales-focused principal, and that's okay to be a sales-focused principal if you've got both sales and PM in your business, is to make sure that you have someone in your team that is focused on that property management side and probably has a part ownership or some kind of profit share investment, so that you know that you've got their full intention long term, and then you've got them reporting back to you, and you can know that you're growing that asset for your financial future, but they're also protecting it as though it's their own as well. And that could be with the department leader. And also something to consider, a lot of people come to me saying they lose their BDMs because they go to sales or they go to start up their own rent rolls. And one of the conversations that I had had with Jade prior to her deciding to go down the sales path was to have a buy-in into the Hervey Bay portion of the business, because it's the area that I live in and I love. And we had discussed that and we'd worked at a plan, and then for her she got to the stage where she just said, it's not for me anymore. I know it's now time for me to sell. I really want to do this with you, Tara, but I feel it's unfair that I know I'm mentally not there anymore. So then she obviously went down that sales process. And if that hadn't been the case and I was able to buy in, I would have been prepared to stay in her business. But I was getting to the stage as a BDM, I was very fortunate. I was able to have one of my biggest months of signing up 30 managements and had some great achievements, but I peaked in all these areas and then started to lose motivation. So you've got to find ways to keep your individuals motivated, or they come to yourself, they come to myself, Ellen, they want to start their own, they want to create something for themselves if they're not given that opportunity. So the business owners that are watching this, definitely be aware of that with your team. If you've got someone that is a top performer, that they're thriving, keep them thriving under your banner. Don't let them go off and compete against you.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that for me, I went and started my rent roll in spite of being offered a bit of a buy-in at the agency that I was at. But I think it comes down to, it's not always just money that's
No, it's not.
that's a good incentive. I think we all have our languages of appreciation, and I think it's really important to figure out how your staff like to be rewarded and recognised, so that you can incentivise them to stay with you based on whatever works for them.
Absolutely. Regular reviews for sure. But look, I know that we have definitely probably gone over our hour as planned, Ellen, but there is an immense amount of information there for those who have watched the recording. Thank you for joining us and for your patience as well. We're glad that we've been able to bring you this presentation, and I'm really keen to do another one, Ellen, so let's keep those doors open of
Yeah, me too.
communication.
Let's do that.
We'll do some more practice and get this, hopefully your internet side sorted out, and we'll be
That's right.
ready and raring for the next one.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, Tara.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.